Welcome to Only Joe, where lab leaks, bunkers, and bureaucratic weirdness all collide. If even half of this is true, the most stressful room in America is not the Situation Room. It's apparently a biolab with bad oversight and a conference call full of people saying everything's fine. And somehow the backup plan for civilizational collapse still sounds like a very expensive game of hide-and-seek underground. The big ugly claim here is that gain of function is basically a polite, grant-friendly phrase for making pathogens nastier. More virulent, more transmissible, harder to treat. At a certain point, you're not just studying a threat, you're building one in a nicer font. What makes this hit harder is the alleged conflict baked into it. Military money comes in under the banner of prophylactic research, so the same system that says it's protecting you is also engineering the thing you supposedly need protection from. Annie Jacobson says most of the experts she talked to now lean toward COVID, most likely coming from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is a brutal reversal from the old natural spillover certainty. Her argument is that the early shutdown of the lab leak idea wasn't just caution, it was political protection, especially with Fauci's ties to EcoHealth Alliance sitting right there in the blast zone. That's the part people text each other about. Not just the theory, but the possibility that the public got a confidence performance instead of an honest uncertainty. Then it gets even messier. Fauci gets described here as having a 10-year blanket pardon, which instantly makes every accountability question feel a lot louder. And the allegation that he pleaded the fifth on trivial stuff during hearings is just awful optics. If you're untouchable and still acting that jumpy, people are going to draw their own conclusions. Add in those released emails suggesting he knew the fatality rate was lower than what the public was led to believe and that social distancing was basically nonsense. And you can see why trust didn't just crack, it got launched through a wall. Jacobson's comparison of masks to a left-wing MAGA hat is spicy, but you can see the point she was making. Once the evidence shifted and transmission protection looked negligible, a lot of the mask behavior stopped reading as science and started reading as identity. When an LA building and safety official is still publicly pushing masks long after mandates are gone, that's not calm public health communication, that's the cultural afterlife of a policy. The CDC and WHO take a beating in this conversation too. They first said COVID wasn't airborne, partnered with Lysol, then later reversed course without some giant public my bad. And the whole surface transmission panic turned out to be wildly overstated, with that 1 in 10,000 fomite claim later debunked. That kind of messaging failure doesn't just confuse people for a week, it trains them to assume the next official statement is also part science, part theatre, part branding exercise. One of the most unsettling points here is how low the barrier is compared with nukes. You don't need a nation-state and a desert test site. The claim is that someone with a high school education and a modest home lab can synthesize something lethal, and the Vegas garage case with 1,200 samples, including HIV and malaria, is the nightmare visual. Then remember the scale, around 1,500 BSL-3 labs in the US, 3,500 worldwide, and supposedly a lot of them don't have robust enough safety rules. That's a giant system asking us to be cool about a lot of doors staying closed. The high containment lab boom is another one of those facts that sounds fake until you hear the numbers. The US had 2 BSL-4 facilities before 9/11 and now has 15. Worldwide, it's roughly 110, including in unstable regions, which is not exactly comforting when these places exist to handle civilization-ending material. And Jacobson ties that to the Soviet example, where they signed the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention and then allegedly kept a huge secret bioweapons machine running anyway. Defectors described anthrax vats big enough to kill everyone in New York City. That's not a compliance issue. That's a horror movie with paperwork. The declassified Pentagon war games might be the most chillingly bureaucratic thing in the whole stack. Apparently, some of these pandemic scenarios just stop at day 6 because after that it's anarchy and chaos, which is an amazing summary for a government document and a terrible sign for the rest of us. Then you get the continuity of government system and COGCON, where devolution crews are sent to underground sites like Raven Rock and Mount Weather, because the assumption is the normal government may be dead or incapacitated. And the anecdote that Bush may have been moved in a disguised laundry truck on 9/11 is exactly the kind of detail that sounds ridiculous right up until you remember these plans exist to avoid getting everyone killed. Now layer AI on top of all this, because of course the future found a way to make the nightmare more efficient. DARPA officials are reportedly worried that tools like ChatGPT can be coaxed into revealing classified locations tied to the strategic national stockpile, which means your chatbot is now part of the threat model. And the fact that 6 AI CEOs are allegedly being asked to pause AI-driven biological research tells you something weird and important. Private tech leaders are suddenly sitting near the center of national security decisions. One thing this conversation pushes hard is that conspiracy is a legal term, not just a label for people with a corkboard. If a group coordinates to mislead the public, that's the issue. And Jacobson's claim is that a cluster of scientists, along with Fauci, helped frame lab leak as natural spillover to manage the narrative. You don't have to swallow every allegation whole to get the bigger point. History is full of real coordinated deception, so dismissing every uncomfortable question as crazy is lazy. So that's today's uplifting package: engineered pathogens, shaky messaging, secret bunkers, and AI wandering into the blast radius. Thanks for hanging out with Only Joe. If nothing else, maybe be a little suspicious of anyone who says, don't ask questions, and definitely trust the experts. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.